know, I didn't say this as we were giving the Watchdog Award to our friends at the Sun-Times. Some of you who are old enough to remember may know this, but I would say in this room, only my wife and a few others would know that I actually worked for the Chicago Sun-Times way, way back when, 1974 and 5 and into 1976. The paper at that time was called The Bright One. And I would argue that it's done bright, important reporting ever since. And David and I also share something in common, a number of years at NBC. David, a professional lifetime until recently, and me 7 years in the 80s, I'm sorry, in the 70s into the 80s. David spent 25 years with NBC covering every big story in the world and interviewing every big newsmaker who made those stories around the world. And the reason we invited him is because what David did for all those years, especially at Meet the Press, was to shine a light on government officials and hold them accountable. It's virtually the same thing we do in our own little world here at the BGA. And vigilance is a centerpiece of what you do when you grill public officials, either on television or by way of your watchdog work. So David, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
And a big shout out to Ava Gregory, David's 9-year-old daughter, who accompanied him on this trip as part of her civics education. Did similar things with my 3, took one to the first hearing of the Clinton impeachment in '98.
Right.
Took another on a train ride from Chicago to Springfield to meet the Bush-Cheney ticket when W and his vice president were campaigning for re-election in '04. And then my third one got an inside look at one of the Democratic or Republican conventions, I believe in LA in 2000. She was at my side for the whole convention. I think it's part of the civic education that too few of our young people get these days. David and I blessed, along with most of you in this room, with opportunities to do those sorts of things. And if you have children, grab them every chance you get.
Yeah.
Let me begin by asking you, David, the question everybody would want to know, which is, you're a free agent now after all those years with NBC and Meet the Press. So what's next? I only know what I read, which is books and other television gigs.
Yeah, you know, I'm taking my time. It was a terrific run at NBC. I am working on a book that comes out next year, which I'm finishing writing this year, and doing a lot of speaking, and I'm taking a little bit of time. You know, I started in television at 18 and was with NBC for almost 20 years. So I'm going to take a little bit of time and survey the landscape. I've got some ideas for, you know, my own media platform perhaps that I'd like to pursue, and talk to some other folks about what might be out there. But mostly I want to take my time.
You know, you mentioned a media platform, and that leads right into the next question I was going to ask you. 10 years ago, no one would have ever used a term like that.
Right.
You would have been talking about your next television job, which I was doing the same thing after I left ABC for a few months, talking about my next television job, because that was pretty much what was going on. But now, when you talk about platforms, there are all kinds of ways you can work in the communications business. I'm just wondering if you think that that is serving the public good or diluting it too much.
Well, I think one of the things that people expect is for two things: for information to reach them where they are, as opposed to having to seek out an appointment in order to become informed. And secondly, they want to be part of the conversation. I think there's less and less desire for people to be talked at, broadcast to. And so you've got to be able to get part of that conversation and involve people in that conversation. I think there is some dilution. I think one of the great dangers, especially in political reporting, is that there's too much viewpoint on demand. Too many of us are in a position now to be able to seek out a viewpoint that validates our own, instead of, you know, reading something that might enlighten you. I mean, I think the importance of what you're doing and the importance of good accountability and investigative reporting is that it exposes things that, by the way, the government may not have known, in addition to the public. And that's where you get some real change. So that's one of my concerns about it, but I do think the great news right now in the media transformation, which is, you know, disruptive as hell to the networks and to big media institutions and to the print industry, obviously, is that content still is really important, and brands are really important. People have a great hunger for information and all kinds of different ways to get it. So that's the good news. So that creates a lot of opportunity.
And so you could be just as likely to end up on a platform in a digital world as you would on a TV network.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think there's so much that's going on. I think we have to recognize that television is one corner of this, and there's a lot of good television. But there's a lot of media platforms that are reaching more and more people. That's a big part of the future. So I got into television when I was 18, and I'm now 44. So that amount of time now, as I think about the next chapter, it is to think about people my age and younger and how they're consuming. I want to reorient how I'm thinking about it.
How concerned are you about something that troubles me deeply, and that is what I consider to be a democracy that has, to a great extent, been hijacked by insiders in the political world, whether they're the two parties fighting one another rather than serving us, or enriching themselves because they view government as a business and not a service, or simply just not doing the job because no one's holding them accountable. I think we're seeing a real diminution in our government and our democracy, in access and participation, and it's a real credit to this strong, great country that we do as well as we do in spite of that. Do you think that's a reversible trend? I've watched it decelerate in the wrong direction for a long time.
One of the things that troubles me, is I think it's something to be careful about, is the growing disillusionment with government and the growing disillusionment with big institutions. So there is such an erosion of trust that people have in big institutions. It's government, it's big media, it can be our faith institutions, it can be the NFL. I mean, everybody who gets really big and really powerful, I think, is viewed as a little bit more suspicious now. And that erosion of trust, I think, has an impact on the kind of media coverage of government, people who are attracted to government, and the public's belief that government is capable of doing the right thing and not just the wrong thing. So it's a slightly different way of answering your question, which is, yeah, I despair about government and its inability to perform well, but I worry about this erosion of trust that's affecting all institutions, that drives down participation. There's a greater sense that government is less relevant to people, and that there are other disruptive ways to affect change. But there's a lot of people who want to be involved, a lot of young people who want to be inspired, who want to, who vote in great numbers when they're inspired, who want to see change. But they're discerning in their taste. They want, isn't it interesting, and I'm sure there's a lot of business people in the room, how many young people come into a large corporation and they want to know what the corporation stands for? Not just what it does, but what does it stand for? Not just what do you do, but who are you? And that says something about that sensibility that younger people have in terms of getting into the process.